West Virginia, Mr. McKinley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Breen, for appearing here today. I was impressed with how quickly you were able to put together these recommendations, because apparently the charge was put in May, and by July they had 42 recommendations. That's, given the work output in Washington, that's a dynamic thing to be able to accomplish 42 recommendations in 2 months to come up with it. And I was particularly impressed with one component of it. It was, I think, a recommendation 23 and 28 perhaps, had to do with comfort levels, comfort letters. Having come from the engineering practice and working on some of these Superfund sites and other brownfield locations, owners are desperately want to understand whether or not this site is clean. And I don't know whether people have been able to read yet the recommendations that you had, but one of the comfort levels that in the past is pretty illuminating, in that here it is at the conclusion of a typical comfort level. It says this letter, this is coming from the EPA, this letter is provided solely for informational purposes. They're trying to get, an owner is trying to find out, or a prospective buyer, is this site clean? And so the government gets back to them in a bureaucratic fashion by saying this letter is provided solely for informational purposes and is not otherwise intended to limit or affect the EPA's authority under CERCLA or provide a release from CERCLA liability. There's no comfort. So I'm curious now, how much progress do you think have you made since July, when those report came out, that you might be able to have something on a comfort level that actually does give comfort and support for someone?
Thanks, Mr. McKinley. So we do intend to come out with a quarterly progress report starting soon that would have recommendation by recommendation our approach. What I'd like to do is offer a briefing for you and your staff on where we are on that particular recommendation in particular, without waiting for the quarterly report. We'll get back to you with some specifics.
Okay, if you could. The other is, I'm trying to understand the driving factor that puts these sites.
Yes.
Is it bankruptcies? Can you, if a company declares bankruptcy, there seems to be unclear whether or not they can shed their liability in a bankruptcy. What causes a site to be transferred from a corporation or a business over to the federal government to clean it up? What would be an example?
So a site could be on the National Superfund priority list with a bankruptcy situation or without, either one. Bankruptcy would be an important marker that there are not enough assets in the corporation in order for the enforcement part of the Superfund program to seek cost recovery.
But couldn't we go back personally on the stockholders or some? Why has this become a way to shed responsibilities of corporations to the federal government?
So there are lawyers at the Justice Department who do this 12 hours a day. I would probably do best to get you one of the environmental bankruptcy lawyers at the Justice Department.
Yeah, I'd like to hear back from someone what would be some suggested legislation that we might be able to do to make sure they can't shed this, because we've had enough problems around here with corporations shedding their pension responsibilities, and I don't like the idea of them also shedding their environmental liabilities as well. So
thank you.
is there anything else that there's another question. If it's taking 5 years to come up with a plan, why would that, what can we do from Congress to speed up this process, that after we've identified it, why would it take 5 years to come up with a remedial process when EPA has demonstrated that within 2 months they can come up with 42 suggestions?
So we don't want it to take long either. We are. That's why we come to work every day, is to get it cleaned up. The truth is, we don't pick the worst sites. The worst sites get, what I mean to say is, we pick the worst sites. We didn't make them. So they're on our list precisely because they're hard and difficult. So sometimes to do it right does take time, but we want to go faster too.
Okay, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time.